Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm doing another one in the series where I do the sketch, you do the painting. You can download the sketch from my Etsy shop, Caroline's Art 123, and print out as many times as you like, paint it as many times as you like, and you can paint the picture along with me at Caroline's Art on YouTube. Once you've printed the picture, you can use tracing paper to transfer it. I'm using 140 pound mixed media paper for this project. I'm using acrylic paint, titanium white, primary yellow, raw sienna, raw umber, French ultramarine blue, sap green and alizarin crimson. I'm mixing French ultramarine blue with titanium white and a fair amount of water to make it fairly thin so that my sketch will show through. To be honest, I don't usually use much of a sketch. But in this case I thought it might be helpful to some people, and you can do this painting in I'm using acrylics, but you can do it in watercolor, you can use pencil, you can use almost any medium that you care to once you've got a sketch. I don't mind if the sketch shows through in places. In some areas I will use quite thick paint, probably the leaves, maybe some of the petals, but if a few pieces of the sketch shows through, it just adds texture and I don't mind that. I'm adding some sap green to my mixture and probably a little more titanium white to make it pale, and I'm going to use this for the ocean. I'm painting straight across the sketch. It shows through, the paint is so thin, and this is my first layer of paint, so I don't have to worry too much. If you're using pencil, you can stick more or less to the sketch, I suppose, but I'm using paint, so my brush will be what defines the petals. I think that's the best way of saying it. I want a sunny coastline, so I'm adding a little yellow to the mixture, and I'll put some of that in the water too. Depending where you live, you know, you may have cloudier skies or something. Water usually reflects the sky. But I like to get other colours in there. I like to get yellows and turquoise and different things in the water to make it look interesting. And this is probably not how it's going to end. We'll see as we go along. Now I've decided on a dark blue pot, so I'm going to use straight French ultramarine blue, and I've decided that the light is coming from the, I guess it would be the left hand side of the picture. I know I've got a blob of paint there, we'll use that for the light. I'm using straight raw umber for the dirt in the pot. At this stage I'm just putting in the first layer of paint, and things may or may not change as far as shadow and light go. I'm adding some sap green for the leaves, a darker green to the mixture, and I pull in the stroke from the outside of the leaf in toward the center. I think it gives a more leaf-like appearance, and the brush sort of makes the leaf. You often don't have to even put veins in because of that. I think it makes quite a natural leaf look, appearance. I'm just pulling the paint from the central mixture on my palette, and as you can see there is variation in the colour, and I really don't mind that. I find that when I go back to look at my painting, I stand back and look at it, I can see where I need to add touches of light or dark and where I can just leave it because of happenstance. I'm going to use some raw sienna mixed with the colour that's already on my brush, which is quite green, and I'm going to suggest a sort of scrubby ground with I don't know, think of something leafy and sandy and scrubby. I'm going to say right here that if you follow along with my style of painting, you're going to end up with a very loose painting. I'm not a precise painter, and I like a little serendipity in my work, and it's generally considered as very loose, or quite loose, let's put it that way. I'm adding a swipe of white to the sailboat and a little to the lighthouse in the distance, and I will probably add more highlight to that later on. And I do sort of try and get my colours all through my painting. The sky is probably the least tampered with, put it that way. I've changed to a small round. Sometimes I use a liner brush, and I'm going to use neat raw sienna for the stems, and I will be adding other colours, possibly red, alizarin crimson rather, and sometimes I add blue, green, whatever, to add light and shadow. I like to get a lot of colour on my stems as well. You can't see this very well, but I added some yellow to the alizarin crimson to give me a sort of orangey colour for the buds, and it's mostly still red, but there you go. And I'm just doing the buds with this because the flower overhangs them and they're in quite a lot of shadow usually. I will use touches of probably cad red light, which I will add to my palette to give me some light on the buds later on when I start adding my lights and shadows. I usually get sort of a mid-tone all over my painting first as a first layer, and then add light and shadow after that. This was very dark down here, so I'm adding white, and then I'll go over in a little while once it's dried a bit and add more colour in, add more red in. For the petals, I'm letting the brush do the work. I'm laying the tip of my brush very lightly at the tip of the petal, and then pushing down slightly, very lightly again, to bring it in toward the center of the flower, always working from the outside edge into the center, with leaves, with petals, with any kind of flower. That's my dog Tommy and his best friend Wolfgang. I expect there's somebody walking along outside. They really don't like other people walking dogs down their street. In this sketch there are holes between the petals, between the little florets, where you can see the sky. But there are other ways of painting geraniums. You could fill in the background with a basic dark red and then put lighter petals on the top. That looks very effective too. And I've done that with almost all my paintings of geraniums, where I don't use a sketch. It just depends really what you like. And that's the other thing, you don't have to follow the sketch exactly. If you feel it needs more florets, more petals, more leaves, or different colour pot, you can do that. It's all up to you. The sketch is not something you have to follow exactly. It is just something as a guideline. That's a better idea actually. Think of the sketch as a guideline, and you don't have to follow it. It's not set in stone. You can add to it or take away from it as you please. Some types of geraniums have this sort of brown marking on the leaf, and I'm putting it in raw umber, but it won't stay completely as I put it. As I put in light and shadow, that will enhance or remove it. I think that's too thick for a mast. Some things are better done with a marker at the end of the painting, and that's what I usually do. I usually do finer details using acrylic markers, and you could do fine lines. You could scribble around, put in grasses, things like that, and it will enhance your painting because it will add texture, and you can get some lovely colours and markers as well. I added some yellow, primary yellow, to the alizarin crimson to make it sort of orange, and I'm going to dot that around the petals. It's not as good as cadmium red, which gives you a really bright, vibrant, light red, and I will add that to my palette, but this does add a little variation, and that's always good. It's always good to add a little interest in the paint. Okay, I've added the cad red light to my palette, and this will make a big difference actually. It's probably not the lightest I'll get. I'll probably add some yellow and white into that to make it a little bit brighter, but it will help a lot in adding volume and dimension to the flower head. And I'll probably add some blue or maybe mauve or purple to make a shadow, and it will give that roundness to the flower. Well, I actually didn't do any of those things because when I had finished, I quite liked it with just the 3 colours, and I think that gave it enough dimension. I'm not a professional teacher, I just share my painting experience. And I will say here that you can get quite a nice painting by using 3 colour values, a mid-tone, a highlight and a shadow. And that will give you a nice painting, but the more values you can get, the number of different shades of colour that you can get in a painting, the more interesting your painting will look. For the centres, I'm using a mixture of sap green and primary yellow, and I'm just going to dot those in. It's actually 4 little dots. I don't know what they call that centre. It's sort of like a stamen, I suppose, and it's, I think, in 4 parts, but I'm just going to put one smudgy sort of dot in the middle of each floret. Well, not in every floret, just in many of the florets, until it looks right, you know. So I've actually painted my picture in the mid-tone, what I'm calling the mid-tone. It has got some lights and shadows in it, but now I'm advanced to the stage where I'm going to consider my shadows and my highlights and paint those in. For instance, this leaf here is in full shadow in my opinion, so I'm using sap green, and I think I have some French ultramarine blue in there. Sometimes I use raw umber. I'm using a 3/4 inch flat, and I'm going to pull the leaf in from the outer edge in toward the center. I feel that this gives me a better leaf shape. Sometimes I put the veins in and sometimes I just leave it. It really depends how I feel about the finished leaf, if it has enough striation on it to make it look leaf-like. It's hard to describe that, but you'll know what I mean when you try it for yourselves. This highlight may or may not be light enough. I find I have to stand back. I have to give maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes to a painting and just let it sit and just look at it and then decide whether I've got my values right or not. And I always need that time. I can't just decide on the spur of the moment that, okay, this is dark enough or this is light enough. I just have to give it that time. I usually make myself a cup of tea and sit and look at the painting, and or sometimes watch TV or something and then come back to it and look at it with a fresh eye. But I find you need that time. I'm just sort of scrubbing things around here just to add a little texture. I'm adding more white, titanium white to my lighthouse and sail. I like to add that kind of thing into my painting, lighthouses, birds, whatever, because I like to draw the eye into the distance. I like depth and perspective. I'm not very good at perspective, but I like to be able to feel that you could walk into one of my paintings. It's not just flat 2D. There's actually a little bench at the edge of the water, and I'm going to draw that in with markers. I think it will be much easier to do. Here are my markers. They've got two tips. I always use the fine tip. Here you can see I did the mast, the edge of the lighthouse. I actually painted the top red with marker, not in this picture, and I put some sort of scrubby stuff on the headland, and I put some texture. I'm not sure these are very good pictures to show it, but I put some texture in the foreground in the grasses, and I think it has improved. Now if you look too closely it looks markerish, but if you stand back and look at it, it blends in. It just adds, as I say, adds texture to the painting, and I kind of like the effect myself. I also drew out the pot because it wasn't quite balanced, and I think when you look at the painting as a whole, it's much improved with the markers. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my video. Do buy the sketch on Etsy.com, Caroline's Art 123, and try it for yourself. And good luck with it, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.